Welcome, everyone. As everyone is aware, Sprunki is a unique game with singing characters who are thrown from a happy and joyful place into a terrifying world, with each new mod becoming scarier than the last. However, what if we could save all the Sprunki? Would they all survive? How would they look? Let's see an ordinary scene with a soundtrack, but even in this version, all the characters appear to be afraid of something. Let's examine each character to determine what happened to them. Starting with Orin, he was a good-hearted and happy character who had no enemies or people who wanted to hurt him. However, as we know from the horror version of the game, Wenda tore him apart. Let's examine how he might have survived what happened to him. We see a dejected Orin who is no longer happy but is still alive, with his body covered in bandages where his wound was. He is saved, but his face indicates that he has gone through a terrible ordeal. As is well known, the second person to die was Ratty. He committed suicide because of intense inner pain that Wenda caused by humiliating and insulting him, saying that he was worthless and that the world would be a better place without him. However, in the happy ending, he is shown to be alive, with half of his face bandaged and severely injured, but he still appears angry. I believe he is angry at Wenda and may even be planning revenge. When death finally arrived, Kluwer wanted to improve the world by creating new homes for the characters and play areas for everyone to enjoy. However, there was an accident on the construction site, and I believe Wenda was also involved in his death. She may have pushed him from a great height, causing severe head trauma. Now let's see what happens if he is saved, like the others who survived, but his head is bandaged, which is great, but he shows no emotion. Perhaps the severe injury left lasting effects so that he will always be sad now. He looks almost exactly like he did in the original version when everything was still good, but I think he'll never be as happy as he once was because the horrors he witnessed are now etched in his mind and he'll never be able to forget them. Now, when Wenda started hurting the others, Funbot couldn't handle it and was probably thrown into a depression. The Veneria. Although the sprout on her head started to grow into her skull and take nourishment from her blood and hair, she seemed to be in good health and serene in the updated version. Her eyes remain closed though. Perhaps they can still be rescued. However, in this version of the game, she will be okay because she requires time to heal without opening them. In another version, however, Veneria survives, but she will never be able to see them again. What are your thoughts on that? Please share them in the comments section. In the horror version of the game, Gray survived but was horrified. In the current version, Gray is still alive and still quite frightened despite everything. At first, Gray was able to hide, but Wenda discovered him and gave him a severe knock to the head. We know for sure that Brood was bitten by his brother Simon, who attempted to kill him several times by first biting his head and then his body. Despite the serious injuries we see in the horror version, Brood survived, so what's his story? In the happy ending, we see him alive, his body free of bandages, and his wounds look very different from those of the others. I believe that his body heals itself. Although there is no sign of blood on his neck and his eye is intact, he doesn't appear happy like the other survivors do. It's difficult to go through something like that and simply return to a normal life, old wax. His wounds appear to be healing, and I believe he will soon fully recover. Garrel died at W's hands after she tightened his robotic glasses so forcefully that the pressure and glass shards damaged his mouth and left eye. Wenda ripped away as CX died a brutal and gory death. She will be alright in this game version, though, as she needs time to recover without opening them. However, Veneria lives in a different version, but she will never be able to see them again. How do you feel about that? In the comments area, kindly share them. Gray survived but was appalled in the horror edition of the game. In the current version, he is still alive and still terribly scared in spite of everything. Gray managed to conceal at first, but Wenda found him and knocked him hard on the head. How about Sky? Wenda caused him excruciating pain by driving 4 rods into his body and torturing him without showing mercy. Despite the constant suffering, Sky has miraculously recovered and appears to be in stable condition. His head is heavily bandaged, with one side completely wrapped to conceal any visible wounds, but he appears unsatisfied. Nevertheless, it is a relief that he is still alive. In the alternate version where everyone survives, Mr. Sun appears completely unaffected, as if the Dark Alliance never happened. It's as if we're seeing a reality where Mr. Sun resisted. Let's dig into his story next. Previously, we saw him being coerced into becoming an accomplice by Black. I hope he continues to recover quickly and fully regains his strength. Then there is Paul, who we covered in a previous video. He suffered a terrible accident that broke his jaw and then his neck, but in this survival version, he seems to have fully recovered his jaw and, more importantly, his neck. In this case, he didn't become an enemy or contribute to the harm of others, even though he still has a dejected expression. Regarding Mr. Tree, he was forced to bear the burden of shame all the time because his face was glued to a missing poster: the disappearance of a young girl. In a recent video, we shared a theory about a girl named McKenna May from Dayton, Ohio, and even managed to find a real-world connection. If you haven't seen that theory yet, check it out on our channel right now, where everyone survives in an alternate happy ending. Mr. Tree is unique. With bright green leaves and no poster attached, he stands calmly, even grinning. It appears the mod creator may be hinting at something more profound. Perhaps Mr. Tree's happiness is connected to the return of the missing girl. If so, it's a genuinely hopeful conclusion, and I'd love to think this is the intended resolution. Let's go to the plot of Simon in the Dark. Although Simon eventually took his own life to sate his hunger, in the new, happier version of himself, Simon looks completely changed, as if the darkness within him has completely disappeared. Simon was so consumed by hunger that he even bit his brother, Brood, but fortunately, Brood survived. In the horror version, he somehow survived, but it seemed like he saw everything desperately wanting to warn us, but Black ended up permanently silencing him. Now he's a normal character with total control over his impulses and no intention of hurting anyone. It's a remarkable change that shows a side of Simon free from his primal, dangerous urges. Do you think Mr. Fun Computer still feels the need to share what he saw, even though his computer is quiet and almost subdued? The screen that used to be full of energy and joy is now just displaying a neutral expression with a single note lingering on it. Wenda became Black's weapon and killed nearly every character after going insane or being coerced by Black. When Wenda begins to sing, we see her smile, but it's probably just an illusion as she tries to conceal her actual feelings behind this fake smile. However, now that all the characters are alive, Wenda isn't happy at all. I believe she's upset because in this version she's just an ordinary character. She liked the horror version where she could kill there and felt fantastic. She is attempting to act cheerful in this happy finale, but as soon as she finishes singing, we can sense her true feelings. Please share your thoughts in the comments section, subscribe to the channel, and like the video. How could the Sprunks have survived? Who saved them? Hi there, everybody. In this video, I'll discuss Phase 5, which is regarded as the most horrific of all. Let's start with Veneria, who in the early stages became infected with a parasite that started to grow inside her body, draining her life energy and eventually killing her until only her head remained. As you may know, there are only 2 phases in the official game. I propose that Phases 3 and 4 could be parallel realities where the fate of many Spoonies was even harsher and their suffering more agonizing. The parasite has nearly completely consumed Venera's body in the new phase, and eventually a lot of eyes appear. I think this parasite may be using them for attack or defense because it wants to stay in her body forever. Ratty killed himself by hanging because he had obsessive thoughts, or maybe after seeing his friends die. I think Wenda may have been the one who told him he was worthless and should end his life. Wenda removed Ratty's skin and gouged out his eyes when he passed away. In Phase 5, Ratty has nearly lost all of his skin, and his head has cracked from his motions, indicating that he has gone utterly insane. Let's now discuss Gray. At first, he was able to survive by hiding, but he saw one of Wenda's murders. Despite their friendship, Wenda couldn't let Gray live because he saw something he shouldn't have seen. Wenda struck Gray on the head with a stick, and although he survived, he was seriously injured. Unfortunately, in Phase 5, he suffered even more severe injuries and became insane. Jevon. If you follow his changes from Phases 3 to 5, you'll notice that he's become even darker and more enigmatic, which supports the fact that he's a cultist and probably now a part of one. In Phase 5, he's missing his eyes, which he may have sacrificed as part of a ritual offering. What happened to Wenda? We all know that she was manipulated by Black or Jeff and developed a bloodthirsty nature. By Phase 3, she had completely lost her mind and was useless to Black and Jeff. In Phase 5, we observe that Wenda has no eyes or jaw, most likely as a result of Mafia torture, after Black struck a deal with a member of the Colorbox Mustard Mafia and they killed her. Wenda tore Orin apart in Phases 3 and 4. Orin's face was severely wounded, as if it had been torn apart, and it appears that Wenda used her claws to do this. In Phase 5, we observe that he jerks around a lot, most likely in pain, or that his body has gone green, potentially as a result of Venera's infection spreading to him. Derpal. Looking at Phases 3 and 4, it's evident that the creator acknowledged that his skin is so elastic that he probably overstretched his jaw and broke the joint. In Phase 5, his face and body stretch significantly, and at one point he hides. Why do you think he does that? Funbot probably noticed that the majority of his friends were in states of panic, death, or despair, which made him afraid and possibly even depressed. In Phase 3, his mouth resembles Black's face. In Phase 4, Brood was subjected to a vicious series of attacks, including a confirmed bite from Simon, but amazingly, he felt no pain and survived. I believe Black may have attempted to influence Funbot, but it appears Funbot didn't want to turn to the dark side and preferred to shut down permanently. When Simon saw how resilient Brew was, he bit him again, sinking his teeth into his body to cause more damage. Amazingly, Brood survived this second attack, but by Phase 5, his condition has significantly deteriorated as he is ripped to tiny dispersed pieces, most likely by Simon's strong, merciless teeth. However, Geralt met a terrible end at the hands of Wenda, who brutally tightened his robotic glasses to such an extent that the lenses were broken by the intense pressure. As a result, his lips and left eye sustained major injury from the force and the shards. Wenda proceeded to further injure Geralt by slicing his body and smashing his skull. By Phase 5, his form has significantly degraded, his eyes are completely gone, and his body is horribly crushed and distorted. These relentless attacks also produced a malfunction in his system that colored his eyes an ominous crimson. Oxax also suffered a horrible death. As Phase 5 progresses, Wenda's trauma becomes even more apparent with additional indications of severe injuries. Wenda caused him much anguish by tearing off sections of his face and body, resulting in significant disfigurement and even the loss of an eye. The character's constant terror and harshness of his suffering seem to be overwhelming him with fear, as seen by his visible trembling. In Phase 5, a new transformation takes place when Black takes control of Skye. She now has a single large eye, a dark and menacing feature reminiscent of the eyes frequently seen in the sky, which gives her a demonic, unsettling appearance. Skye suffered a terrible death at the hands of Wenda, who pierced her body with 4 rods, caused severe injuries that ultimately led to her demise. But Wenda's brutality didn't stop even after Skye was obviously mortally wounded. On to Mr. Sun. I had previously thought that Black might have corrupted him and perhaps forced him to become an accomplice, but after carefully analyzing Phases 3, 4, and 5, I can now state with confidence that Black was in fact responsible for this change. There is no denying Black's impact. Many demonic eyes have now covered Mr. Sun's body, giving him uncanny otherworldly appearance. The very fact that these eyes are scattered around his body like sinister symbols indicates that Black's influence has completely corrupted him. The narrative of Mr. Tree is equally terrible and incredibly disturbing. At first, he was possessed by the soul of a young girl who used his life energy while his face was pinned to a missing person sign. This caused him to feel guilty for her death all the time. But as time went on, Black became aware of Mr. Tree's weakening state and started to instill malevolent, dark ideas in his head. This mental anguish gradually changed him, converting his once green body into a gloomy, darkened figure. Eventually, the missing person poster disappeared, signifying that his guilt and all trace of kindness had been removed. By Phase 5, Mr. Tree's loyalty to Black is evident. His body is now covered in the same demonic eyeballs that others have seen, and he emanates a disturbing aura. His sounds have also become more menacing, further demonstrating his decline into darkness. In Phase 3, we see someone in Simon's mouth, as if he had eaten someone and was unable to swallow them, but in Phase 4, he was able to do so after he struggled to resist the overwhelming want to eat. Look at the green tape on his mouth. It appears that they taped it shut so that other Sprunki wouldn't hear his screams. In Phase 5, he has gotten bigger and his voice is quite pleased. I believe he is content to eat other Spunky tuner. Wenda shot him at least twice more and tortured him. In Phase 5, there are serious wounds and a skull fracture. He sounds like he's pleading for help in his music. Mr. Fun Computer knows too much, but he survived, and he most likely saw something horrible and wants to share it with us. In order to prevent us from discovering the truth, Black eventually found him and broke him totally. In Phase 5, the screen separates from the figure, revealing a face. Black may have taken over Mr. Fun Computer's body, Pinky, who was incredibly kind and probably knew something she wasn't supposed to know. Black or Wenda most likely threatened her, killed her after faking her face because they were afraid she would reveal them. We can observe severe brain injuries in Phase 5, including the loss of one eye and no ears. I believe that something heavy may have fallen on Clever, breaking his skull and flattening his head into a thin plate. In Phase 5, the impact was so severe that his eyes fell into his mouth. Clever is passionate about construction, and his death was merely an accident while they were building something in their city. Now that I've explained everything, do you think this game may have a parallel reality? Please share your ideas in the comments section. Hi everyone, you have undoubtedly noticed the introduction of the third and fourth phases in Incredibox. As it is well known that the official version only contains 2 phases, I want to address this issue in today's video by asking where these extra ones came from. In this video, I'll discuss my fascinating notion that these additional phases could be parallel realities where some Spunk's fates were even darker and their suffering more severe. Each of them could have had a tragic and eerie end. In the third and fourth phases, Orin's face appears severely disfigured, almost as if Wenda clawed at it with a frenzied vengeance. Orin's fate was a grisly one. He had no enemies and no one but Wenda had a reason to harm him. It appears that Wenda lost her sanity entirely, turning on several other characters in her madness. This violent turn is why we see ominous traces of blood around her lips and a wild, unsettling look in her eyes. Even though he might have had a chance to survive, things got worse as rescuers tried to help. Sadly, another heavy object fell and crushed his head completely, leaving no chance for recovery. Next, we have Funbot, who probably saw many of his friends panic and die or fall into despair. He was scared and deeply affected, and he might have even begun to experience depression. It's likely that Wenda's manipulation caused him to lose his sanity after his fatal hanging, since he was pushed to hang himself because of obsessive, troubling thoughts that she had subtly inserted into his mind, telling him he was worthless and driving him to the verge of despair. Next, Kluwer met his awful fate, known for his enthusiasm in construction, when Wenda returned to discover him gouging out his eyes in a fit of horrifying wrath and tearing away his skin in a frenzied frenzy. Clear's death appears to have been a sad accident. He was probably working on a city-building project when a big object dropped from the sky, striking him and breaking his skull severely. By the third stage, Funbot's mouth starts to resemble Black's visage, suggesting that Black might have attempted to influence him. However, Funbot most likely rejected this sinister influence and made a different decision, permanently shutting down. Veneria's death was even more upsetting, and the sprout growing on her head started to root into her skull, taking nutrients straight from her blood and hair. Over time, the sprout grew larger and more invasive, eventually consuming her body from within. This decision to prevent further suffering is made clear in the fourth phase, when the Funbot appears completely dormant. His metamorphosis physically destroyed her until only her head remained a terrifying reminder of who she used to be. According to one theory, Gray may have survived at first by deftly evading detection. His fear appears to have served as a survival instinct, keeping him safe for a while. However, Wenda eventually found his hiding place and struck him on the head, causing serious injuries. Although Gray survived the initial blow, the injuries were extensive, leaving him vulnerable. Last but not least is the strange encounter between Brood and Simon. It has been confirmed that Simon attacked Brood and bit him, but strangely, Brood survived and didn't feel any pain. Simon then bit him again, this time on the body. But even after the second attack, Brood continued to live, leaving Simon perplexed as to why his bites had no effect. Finally, Geralt met a brutal end at the hands of W in a violent rage. When Wenda tore off his robotic glasses, his mouth and left eye were crushed by the extreme pressure and jagged glass fragments. The extent of the trauma caused his system to malfunction and his eyes to glitch into a menacing Red Ox 160, and Wenda viciously tore into his face and body, causing catastrophic injuries. However, her attack didn't end there. She also broke his skull and seriously damaged his body. He was rendered unrecognizable by the extent of the injury, which included the loss of one eye, and Sky's death was as horrific. Wenda impaled him with 4 metal rods, causing severe internal injuries, but even this wasn't enough for her. She drove the rods even deeper, making sure that his death was as drawn out as it was agonizing. However, looking at Mr. Sun, it seems that he didn't escape this tragic sequence of events either. Previously, I suggested that Black might have corrupted him, making him an unwilling accomplice, but after witnessing the eerie changes in phases 3 and 4, I'm convinced that Black had a hand in Mr. Sun's demise. His adaptability caused him to overextend his jaw, dislocating it in the process, but in phases 3 and 4, it's evident that he continued to push himself, breaking it in a twisted accident of his own making and causing a fatal neck injury. Mr. Tree's life was hauntingly tormented by the soul of a young girl who took control of him. This possession sapped his vitality, and his face was nailed to a missing persons poster, making him live with a constant sense of sorrow over her untimely death. But as time went on, Black saw Mr. Tree's growing frailty and took advantage of it, sowing ominous ideas that eventually engulfed him. The missing poster disappeared along with Mr. Tree's residual shame, signaling his total decline as his metamorphosis progressed to the point where he was as dark as Black himself, losing any last vestiges of goodness or regret. Simon's story is one of a fierce internal conflict brought on by an overwhelming hunger. He first resisted the urge, but it soon overtook him. In the third phase, we see someone inside his mouth, possibly a victim, whom he tried to eat but was unable to swallow. By the fourth phase, his transformation is complete, and he has fully embraced his monstrous appetite tuner and consumed his prey. Wenda attacked him in a particularly vicious manner, wounding him, but her suffering didn't stop there. He was shot at least twice more before being tortured. In regards to Mr. Fun Computer, he knows far more than he should have, even though he survived. He probably witnessed something horrific that he was desperate to reveal, but before he could do so, Black discovered him and, sensing the danger of his knowledge, broke his spirit and functionality, permanently silencing him and guaranteeing that we would never know the secrets he held. The green tape placed over his mouth seems to be an attempt to silence him, preventing other spunks from hearing his agonizing screams during his final moments. Regardless of whether she was brainwashed, manipulated by Black or Jevon, or simply brainwashed, W's transformation was one of the most unsettling. By the third phase, she had lost all sanity and was uncontrollable, making her useless to Black and Jevon, who sent Mustard from the Colorbox Mafia to deal with her. Eventually, someone from the Mafia ended her life. Pinky, who was known for her kindness, found herself in danger because she probably knew information that she wasn't supposed to. Sensing danger, Wenda or Black threatened her and even stripped her face of skin to silence her. Ultimately, they killed her to prevent her from disclosing any secrets. Jevon's story is complicated. He is confirmed to be a cultist, and although he survived, his role is still unknown. It's unclear if he personally harmed others, but over time he appeared to become more sinister and dark. Here is the detailed plot of each spunk's fate. Do you think there is a parallel reality in this game where the spunk's destinies are more complicated and darker? Share your theories in the comments section below. The toll of this involvement changed his appearance, giving his character an even more mysterious quality.